3. All right, and we should be on our way to being live. Let's hop into the voice chat. Let's hop into the live stream. Let's make sure everyone can hear me and hear what's going on. There we go. There we go. We're up. We're live. We are live on TikTok. We are live on Twitch, and we should be live indeed on YouTube. So anyone watching on TikTok who wants to watch a bigger stream, get to actually see the whole landscape, get to see the things that I'm drawing on the screen, get to see any research that I'm pulling up while I'm talking about it, head on over to the YouTube stream. That's where it's at. I'm also going to hop into the voice chat in my Discord. So if anyone wants to ask me any questions, that's where I'm going to be. Feel free to drop them into the TikTok chat as well. And in the meantime, while I wait for people to arrive, I did have something I was going to do and I completely forgot. So there is no topic. We now are at the mercy of TikTok. The streams are live, and we're just going to hope and that TikTok essentially sends viewers into the live stream so I actually get some questions. Because if I don't have anyone asking me questions, the stream turns into a rather dull affair. But I have faith. I have faith that we'll get some people in here. Bring up the stream chat. All right. So if anyone has any questions, can drop them into YouTube, Twitch, or TikTok, or Discord. I should be able to see everything. If you want to join the voice chat, hop into the Discord. That's where it's going to be. At the moment, we've got... How many people in the Discord? 91. We're at 91 people in the Discord. So let's see if we can get up to 100 today. 7 more people. That should be doable as long as I stream for more than like a few minutes. My next video that I'm going to be working on, that I am working on, is about the different types of decision-making processes that people on the autism spectrum use. I think it's an interesting topic. I am very much struggling to edit the video for it. I think my script is fine, a little bit repetitive at some points, but fine. But it's really, really interesting because there's this really famous book that came out in 2011 by a guy called Kahneman. He basically broke down the 2 primary types of like reasoning styles that people use to make decisions. Basically said people can either create decisions really quickly based off of just like a feeling, a gut reaction, an intuition. And for most people, that's what they use like all the time, right? Like you encounter like 2 apples at the grocery store, you kind of just like pick one based on the feel of it, the intuition, right? So that's the one type of thinking that most people use most of the time. The second type of thinking that people can use is a really deliberative, analytical, logical, kind of calculated method of thinking. But that way of thinking takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy. You can't use it in every situation, especially situations where there's a lot of dynamics that are changing, a lot of information that's changing really, really quickly. But basically, the book was like, there's these 2 types of thinking. There's really quick, intuitive, slow, and deliberative. And by default, every human being can use both. But most people, most of the time, tend to use the really fast thinking because it's just less energy spending and it works good enough. The video that I'm currently editing is about how people on the autism spectrum seem to be actually quite unique in the way that they arrive at decisions. There doesn't seem to be much intuitive thought processes or decision making being made. And so it's kind of interesting. I think the video is interesting. I think people who watch it will find it interesting. I'm just really struggling to edit it. Sometimes if you eat a big meal during the day, you'll deliberately vomit to remove those calories. That doesn't sound very healthy. Have you considered not doing that and seeing a professional instead? Bulimia is not great for the health of your throat. Even from like a harm reduction point of view, there's ways to starve yourself that are less damaging. Emilio, hello. How you doing? Do I believe in free will? No, but I act as if I do. Thoughts on dissociative identity disorder? Yeah, fuck it, sure, why not? Let's just start with DID this stream. All right, DID, dissociative identity disorder. It used to be known as like, or colloquially it's known as like multiple personality disorder. It's a very, very, very controversial disorder. There was a really famous film by M. Night Shyamalan that came out like 10 years ago, whatever. It was called, I think, Glass. about a person who had multiple personalities, and one of them was a monster that had like superhuman strength. It kind of got famous back in like the 60s. Multiple personalities is like a thing. But the reason it's so controversial is that even among like practicing psychiatrists, people like that, there's still contention among the professional field around like, is this even real? Kevin the movie as well. Yes, Kevin the movie too. It's contentious in terms of like, even professionals are uncertain if this is even a real thing, or if people are simply talking about like the ways they act in different situations as kind of being like whole other personalities, and they don't really mean multiple personalities. But generally what it's defined by is a couple of different things. So it's like acting very differently across certain contexts, or induced by certain contexts. So that has to be like quite different. States of like amnesia / like semi-amnesia, and acting in a way that's kind of dissociated. So like you're not really there. It doesn't feel like you're in control. Sometimes you might not even remember what's going on, and the person who you are feels like that's not who you actually are. So it feels like a different personality is kind of taking over. Typically this comes out as a trauma response, right? So you go through some really, really traumatic event. Your default ego, your default personality can't handle it. It's too overwhelming. So a new personality emerges out of that, and that guy kind of takes over, takes the reins, deals with whatever's going on. Over time, if this new personality is like called upon over and over again, they start to get like really big, they start to get like really strong, and they start to kind of come to the forefront more often and more often and more often. And eventually what you might end up having is like having you and then having your big strong personality, and this guy might have come out so often and developed so uniquely that it's his own entirely new thing. That's kind of fun, right? The goal of most therapies is actually not, there's two different goals, right? So goal number one of therapy with DID is what they call integration. So you take the two personalities and you kind of merge them into one. The other is kind of not integrating into one, but kind of being like, look, these are just two separate parts of like a whole that are living within you, within your brain. Both are valid, both are cool. And it's kind of like just getting them to work together. That's cool as well. Generally speaking, like the dissociative states and the amnesic states and things like that do resolve as you like treat the underlying traumatic memories. So that's cool. But yeah, very, very contentious disorder. Kind of a cool one, kind of a fun one. By the way, if any of you guys are asking me any questions, if I don't see it, it's because TikTok chat moves kind of quick. If you want to ask your questions in a way where I'll probably see them more likely, join my Discord. The link to my Discord's in my link tree, which is in my bio, and there's a psych discussion channel where you can go in my Discord to ask any questions, and I'll answer all of the Discord ones 100% because it moves very slowly. And if you want to join the voice chat, the Discord is the place to go as well. Go and join the waiting room, and I'll drag you into the voice chat when I can. How long did I go to college? So the pathway to become a psychologist in Australia is a minimum of like 6 years of training. For me, that involved 4 years of university, and then 2 years of like workplace training as a provisional psychologist. So 4 + 2, that gave me my 6. Some other ways that you could do it, you could do 5 years at university and then do a 1 year provisional period, or you could do 6 years at university with 0 years on the job training and come out. All three of these pathways can lead to being a fully registered practicing psychologist in Australia. I did the 4 + 2. That's nothing really special about that. How do you deal with a fear of dying? Unironically, just by not focusing on it. I can go deeper into that, but like that's the final answer. Like I could pontificate on that point for about 10 minutes, but the answer you get to when you boil it down is stop thinking about it. Thoughts about high functioning anxiety. Let's reframe this a little bit and talk about something that is high functioning anxiety, but is a little bit more interesting. Let's talk about perfectionism. Perfectionism is a fun topic. So a lot of the people that I see who work with me who have anxiety, particularly teenagers that end up seeing me with anxiety, actually are like quite high functioning in terms of like school and academics, right? They tend to be getting like high A's. They might even be like the ducks of the school. They might be on scholarships. They might be getting really good GPAs in university. But like their personal life is kind of falling apart. Their hygiene, their self-care falling apart. They're super stressed. Their body is unhealthy. but it's all coming from like this perfectionism, right? They're really getting good grades because their anxiety is turbocharging their perfectionism. But that gets them some good grades, so it's kind of functional. The thing with perfectionism is that it's functional right up until it's not, and then the thing that it's propping up begins to fall apart as well. But there's a massive cost to perfectionism in that you'll have one thing that you're propping up and like that's going really, really well. You got that on a high pedestal, but then kind of everything else in your life is just like a giant mess. And then when things fall apart, because you can't be high functioning perfectionist for your entire life, it just doesn't sustain. Then not only is your entire life falling apart, but then the thing you're trying to prop up, that also falls apart. And then everything is just kind of a giant dumpster fire. That's kind of when people find their way into my office. It's like, help. The really tricky thing with perfectionism, though, is typically people don't find their way to me until it's a dumpster fire, because they're really, really scared that if they do something to address the perfectionism, then like their really good grades at school, their perfect GPA, right? If they don't have this perfectionism, they're worried that this is going to tank and then they have nothing. Like they know their life is already a dumpster fire and they're like, well, I can't lose the only thing that's still going, so I have to hold on to this perfectionism. So when people do find me and they're in this state and like they still have something going on, it can be hard to get them out of this perfectionist mindset, but there's ways to do it. There's definitely ways to do it. You have to recognize that you can still achieve like really good grades even without a perfectionistic like anxiety, stress related fuel. The more important revelation tends to be though that like, hey, you might not actually want this. Your anxiety is telling you that this is what you want and that if you don't achieve this, then everything becomes a dumpster fire. But like, maybe you actually just don't want this. Maybe you actually don't want to get like that GPA 7. Maybe that actually is like kind of irrelevant for you. That's kind of a cool place that people can arrive to. I mean, get to there through like values exploration and figuring out what people actually want and why they actually want it. Do I ever struggle to get tasks done? I feel like I'm only productive certain days. The entire reason that I am live streaming right now is because I'm procrastinating editing a video. That is it. That is the whole reason I am live in this exact moment, is because I'm just putting off editing this next video about decision making and the autism spectrum. So yes, struggling to get tasks done, very much so. It's like, let me do this other semi-fun, semi-productive thing so I don't have to do this other semi-productive thing. Neither of them are particularly productive. They're both hobbies. This streaming is a hobby. Video making is a hobby. It's like I'm procrastinating one hobby with another hobby. It's a strange world. Your parents caught you smoking. You don't want to quit, but they might start testing you. Any advice on how to like hide smoking? Depends if you're like, oh, huh? Smoke, the smell, the stench of tobacco kind of clings to things. You can try to be the stereotypical teenager and like get the air purifiers and keep the windows open or whatever, but like the scent clings. Like they'll figure it out. If they have functional noses, they'll figure it out. You think you have DID, but not as bad. You switch up very fast, but not as bad as the movie. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the hallmark things with DID where if it's real, it's like you kind of want to see like semi-amnesic states, like you just don't have memory when different parts are kind of in control. Otherwise, like, is it really DID? Who knows? Again, contentious disorder. Seems like it's real. Majority of the field seems to think that it's real. But yeah, it's a very interesting one. I acknowledge anxiety and mental health, but nowadays it's a cop-out whenever there's some hardship in life. In what way is it a cop-out? Being like, dude, I'm fucking anxious. That's not really a... I mean, I don't know. People make excuses for whatever, but I don't think, generally speaking, people are using mental health as an excuse. You can... Because it comes down to the difference between explaining something and excusing something, right? It's like, look, I'm sorry I didn't do that. I was like really, really depressed or whatever, so I didn't make it out that day. That's an explanation. An excuse would be like, and therefore, like, it's totally fine and I'm never going to, like, follow through with my commitments to you. Like, that would be an excuse. Why do I always act and think psychotic? Have you considered psychosis? fight or flight modes. Yeah, let's go into this. This is like a pet peeve of mine. Let's go into topics today that are just going to like agitate me. That sounds fun. Okay. Fight or flight. Really fun words, right? So, oh God, where do I even want to begin with this? Let's have a think. This is going to be very unstructured, but that's the fun of it, right? Okay, fight or flight. People will talk about fight or flight modes. When you enter into a stressful situation, your fight or flight mode will activate. And some people are fighters and they'll go after it and they'll attack. And some people are flighters. They'll run away. Typically, we might think of fight as being like the anger response to a problem and flight being the anxiety response to a problem. Cool beans. There's a few other modes that exist, however. We also have the freeze mode. Humans don't have freeze as much. It's much more rare. You kind of see it in people who have like a complex trauma background more than anything, where you kind of like lock down, shut down, the brain's off, like you're not there. And a little bit contentiously, there's also the fawn mode, where you kind of go into like acting kind of like a little child or a little baby to kind of appease whatever villain or threat exists. The reason why these are semi-pet peeves of mine is because the way that people use them is just kind of too simplified. I think we are often activating multiple forms of these all at once to the point where like having the categorizations of them is kind of useless. And I think a much better thing to do is when you're talking about your reaction to a situation, instead of being like, were you in fight or flight or freeze or fawn, is just a objective description of behavior. Like, what did you functionally do? What thoughts went through your head? What emotions did you feel in your body? And what behaviors did you do? What words left your mouth? That gives you more information than like, imagine someone's like, yeah, I got into an argument with my wife and I went into flight mode. Like, what does that mean? Like, you stopped receiving Wi-Fi signals? Like, you ran out the door? Like, what does that mean? Oh, no, she was just talking to me and my flight mode is I run away from listening, so I just like stopped listening to her. It's like, okay. What happens when you go into fight mode? Do you like, is it Secret Fight Club? Do you get the chair? Like, is John Cena coming through? No, when I go into fight mode, I start talking about how her sister's hotter than her. It's like, I kind of hate simplifications that are pointless. Simplifications for some concepts are cool and neat and necessary, but I think just objective descriptions of like what's happening only take, generally speaking, like 2 or 3 more seconds to do, and they give you so much more information than being like, oh yeah, he was in fight mode. Like, what does that even mean? That's useless. This information does nothing for me. All right, I wanna find some other questions that are going to get me riled up. Once again, everyone who's here, I'm a registered psychologist, practicing psychology, working with clients a few days a week. It's pretty good. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm streaming on YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. If you want to watch a fuller stream and you're on TikTok, you can go find me on YouTube. If you have any questions that I'm not answering, feel free to join my Discord. The link to my Discord is in my bio. There's a link to my link tree. You can find my Discord. And there's a Q&A channel where I'll answer all the questions from there with priority. So find my Discord and join there to ask any questions, and you get a priority answer. What are my opinion on trans people? Give me a more specific question. How do you notice someone has it? Okay, hang on. Has what? You posted that 11 minutes ago. Wait, how much of the chat have I missed? Akathisia causes constant fight or flight. Is akathisia like the stabbing pain? Sounds like the stabby thing. Am I right? Akathisia. Oh no. Akathisia is a movement disorder that causes a person to feel restless and have an intense need to move. It can be difficult to sit still, and the movements are often repetitive. Okay. Is this like a diagnosable thing? Or is this just like a term in the literature and a pop culture term? Like, is this actually I don't think this is like a diagnosed thing, is it? Like severe restlessness and like motor hyperactivity. I think that's how I would describe that. I wonder if that's actually like a medical term that people use, because I just haven't encountered that before. therapy and psychiatry is a scam. Do you want to come Twitchy Loner, hop into my, I'm down for some discussion. Hop into my Discord, hop into the waiting room voice chat. Let's have a conversation. Do I have a master's in psychology? Nope. So I've got a bachelor's plus a postgrad diploma in psychology, and I did the 4+2 pathway to general registration. So I did those, and I did 2 years of provisional psychology working under a supervisor to gain my general registration. Is surfing over the roof of a police car considered fawn mode? If you have 4 legs, then certainly. Why do we inherit trauma from relatives? Generally speaking, because people with untreated trauma have a tendency of repeating the trauma onto other people. Not always. Maybe in I'm going to pull in, this number is straight out of my ass. 15% of the time, people will recreate the traumas onto other people. How do I help people open up? You provide them with a space wherein they know the person they're talking to holds everything in the strictest of confidentiality, is actually curious about what they're saying, is on their side. Generally, when people are in that kind of environment, they will open up by themselves. You don't have to pry. Why do I lack motivation to do anything, yet you have so much ambition? I'm always late to it. Maybe if your ambition's really, really high, and then you're feeling like your motivation is really, really low, maybe it's because your ambition is setting goals that are really, really high, and your motivation is looking at those goals and going, wow, that's out of reach. And so it's not mustering motivation to do it because it feels like there's no point in pursuing it because your very high ambition is setting goals that are very, very high. Lower the bar to where your motivation can reach, and then raise the bar once it's reached there, and let your motivation climb in a stair-step manner instead of expecting it to do a giant pole vault to the top. Can trust be regained? Generally speaking, yes, over time. Do I believe in ghosts or spirits? I've never seen any evidence that would convince me of their existence. So presently, no. Show me something that we can measure and replicate, and yes. We've got a question from the Discord. I'm making a thing for D&D, and I'm big on accuracy. Is this an appropriate place to ask stuff about this? I mean, fuck it, sure, why not? By the way, if you guys are in my Discord, the link to that's in my bio in my link tree, and you're in the psych discussion channel, you don't have to wait for me to answer questions. If you guys want to discuss things related to psychology, answer other people's questions, do whatever, go ahead. I kind of want that to be more of a general discussion channel rather than just a Q&A, because it started as just a Q&A, but I like seeing the discussions that kind of naturally form there. I think they're kind of cool. So if you're in my Discord, link in the bio, link in the link tree, feel free to hop into the psych discussion thing for any discussions and answer questions. What is the psychology of the oppressed becoming oppressors? I think it's not so much that when some people when they're oppressed want to become oppressors. It's like some people who are bullied then want to become the bully, but that's not it's not necessary that happens. What I think happens though is the environment in which a highly oppressive class of people could come to exist is typically a very unstable and or chaotic and or an environment for which you can manipulate to your own selfish ends. It has to be that kind of an environment. And in those kinds of environments, you'll have power vacuums. So if the oppressed class ends up vanquishing the oppressor, then you just have a vacuum, and maybe part of that oppressed class are people who then want to become oppressors. So I don't think it's necessary that oppressed peoples will always become oppressors, but I think in environments in which a highly oppressive class can even exist in the first place, then when you vanquish them, they're just going to be a power vacuum and someone else needs to take their place. And who better than the people who are still alive? Why is it so hard to give up? We are neurologically, biologically wired to be kind of gritty and keep trying to live. It's a bit wild. Your family really pressuring you to be a doctor, but you're not interested in medicine. Just don't do it. You will be far more successful pursuing something that you actually enjoy than pursuing something like prestigious and monetarily rewarding that you have no interest in. Like, would you rather be a really, really good architect because you enjoy it, or like a very mediocre med student? It's obvious that you'd rather be like a really, really good architect, right? So find something that you have a modicum of skill for and you're interested in and pursue that, rather than just trying to be mediocre in some other field that someone told you was a good idea. How can you prevent sleep paralysis? You can do a few things that would reduce the chance of sleep paralysis. So like eliminate caffeine, eliminate alcohol, eliminate substances, keep a scheduled sleep-wake time pattern, try to like blacken off the room, maybe consider using something like a white noise machine while you're sleeping. These things can reduce the chance of sleep paralysis, but really what you're aiming to be doing would be like lowering overall life stress, life anxiety. That's going to be the biggest thing. Yeah. Do I like psychoanalysis? The way that a lot of people talk about it, no. But I think the way that people talk about like, oh, you have CBT and that's the scientific evidence empirical, and then you have psychoanalysis and that's where we really get into the human mind and you can't quantify it because it's so mysterious. And when you actually look at the results of CBT, the results of psychoanalysis, psychodynamic therapy, whatever, on people's functional improvements, they're kind of the same. When you actually look at the processes that people do, like, oh fuck, this is a gripe. This is what we're doing this live stream. I'm just going to talk about my personal gripes with the field of psychology. Now, when you look at like psychoanalysis, people will be like, oh, CBT is just about gaslighting yourself until you feel better. Psychoanalysis, though, psychodynamic therapy, that's where you really understand the inner workings of your mind and you figure out your internal motivations and why you have proclivities and tendencies to engage in the actions and behaviors that you do. And it's like, hang on. What do you think cognitive restructuring requires? So for those of you who don't know, a core technique in CBT is called cognitive restructuring. Cognitive restructuring is basically we take a look at like what are the thoughts that are going through your head. We analyze those, right? Like, are they helpful or not? Are they based in reality or not? And then we come up with new thoughts that are helpful and based in reality. In order to access these initial automatic thoughts that then lead to behaviors, problematic and helpful, what do you think that requires? That requires you understanding the workings of your mind and what is causing you to have these proclivities and tendencies to have these thoughts that lead to behaviors in the first place. Like, it's the same bloody thing as this. It's the same thing. You just don't have to talk about wanting to bang your dad. That last part is a meme. I know that we're not practicing Freudian psychoanalysis anymore unless you're engaging in, some weird Eastern European nonsense. How do you find motivation for school? Try to figure out ways in which school is going to help you achieve the things that you personally want to achieve. And then remind yourself of those things as many times as it takes. Can untreated trauma be healed itself? Yeah, it can. Let's talk about this. Self-healing trauma. Or another way of thinking about this is, why do a lot of people need help from a trained therapist to get over trauma? Why can't you just kind of like get over it yourself, right? Especially because we know a lot of the mechanisms for healing for trauma are things like exposure. So like thinking about or engaging in looking at images or videos or returning to places where traumatic experiences happen. Why can't you just do exposure therapy by yourself? Right? Why can't you just do this? Or it would be things like, actually, this gets into exactly why you can't do it. The reason why a lot of people can't self-heal from trauma is because trauma doesn't just like give you a physical like stress reaction that you can get over with exposure therapy. Trauma does something else. Trauma distorts perceptions. And when your perceptions become distorted, that leads to things like irrational and illogical thinking that might actually be helpful in a particular environment. For example, if you are, let's say you live in a really dangerous neighborhood and you get attacked by someone who is like really covered in like certain red tattoos, right? And maybe all the gangsters in that area have like red tattoos and then they attack people and they're dangerous, right? Maybe now in your mind you associate like seeing the color red with danger, and so like internally your perception is like red equals danger. In that environment, like that's accurate, adaptive, and helpful. You move to the other side of the country, you still have that belief. It's now irrational and illogical. But like that might be very ingrained in your mind, and you might not even realize that this is a distorted perception until you have like someone who is trained to recognize that that's what's going on for you and to help you kind of like see that and then work through that and then work through like the exposure work. So one of the reasons like people struggle with like the self-healing from trauma is because trauma creates a lot of distortions in perception that you are blind to, because you're blind to the blind spots, right? You don't know what you don't know. When you have irrational, illogical, not based in reality thinking and beliefs and perceptive structures, you can't figure those things out on your own because that's your perception. If you could figure out your own perceptions on your own, like it doesn't compute, right? Like you can't do that. Yeah. The only way you kind of get out of that on your own is when you encounter a lot of evidence, like constantly, that pushes back against this, and you're aware of the evidence, and you're willing to accept the evidence, and you're willing to integrate the evidence into the narrative and context of your life. Yeah, otherwise it just doesn't happen unless you have like someone else there who can help you to be like, hey, look at that. Maybe it's not all accurate. All right, question from the Discord. Someone who's making a D&D thing. He wants some psychological input. So I'm making a zombie virus thing that one of the effects of said virus is it drops every hormone except for stress, anxiety, fear, anger, hormone responses. So you're just left with stress, anxiety, and fear. These are kicked into overdrive all the time. What would the side effects of this be? If you were like stressed, anxious, and fearful and angry all the time, chat, answer this question for me. If you were stressed, anxious, fearful, and angry all the time, this is your energy meter. How far into the day do you think it would take? If we plot it on the graph, this is 8 a.m. in the morning, this is 12 o'clock at noon, this is 4 p.m. in the afternoon. How late into the evening do you think it would take for your energy levels to reach zero? That's what would happen. If you were stressed, angry, and fearful and anxious the entire time, you would be depressed, basically. You would just be collapsing into a little puddle because you would just have not enough energy to sustain that. How do I feel about astrology? I think it's quite peculiar that so many people believe so strongly in it. I don't think that there's any legitimacy to it. In fact, I remember like 6 years ago, maybe, someone put out a thing that basically showed that all the planetary alignments were very, very different to what the astrologers thought they were because of like planetary drift and things like that have occurred over the past several decades. So all of the predictions of astrology, even if they were accurate, would be inaccurate because all the planets are not actually in the places that they, like, yeah. But yeah. Once again, guys, I'm trying to get through this this TikTok chat and Twitch chat and YouTube chat, but like they move really quickly. If you want your questions answered with priority, or if you want to join in the psych discussion or join in via voice chat, hop in my Discord. The link to my Discord is in my link tree, which is in my bio. There's a dedicated psych discussion channel there. Questions there will be answered with priority, and you can also join the voice chat or talk to other people who are asking questions there as well. And whenever I'm streaming in the future, you'll also know because I always join the voice chat in my Discord whenever I'm live. Can narcissists be helped and are able to change? if they are willing to, but that's one of the really tricky things because a lot of people who are narcissists aren't willing to recognize that there's a problem that would require work in the first place. The only time, and this is like 100%, I don't think I've ever encountered an exception other than this from any of like my colleagues at all or my own practice. The only time that like you typically will see like narcissists actually in a therapy setting, and I've never seen this because I don't typically do this work very much. The only time you see it is in couples therapy. It's the only time you'll see a narcissist like come to therapy. And the reason they'll come, and it's typically the male, there's a gender difference with narcissism here. It's typically the male who is a narcissist. And what will happen is that they will go, I have no idea why I'm here. My wife is the one with all the problems. She's the one that needs therapy. But she said if I don't come, she's going to divorce me. Right? These are the only times that you will like find a narcissist like semi-willingly coming to therapy. And it's because like their partner is forcing them to come. Why not psychiatrist? Because then I have to go through med school and I have to do my rotations and I have to like work in... Fuck that, dude. No. It's not even like work. Like, functionally, if my income doubled, tripled, quadrupled, my life doesn't change. I have all the things I want. I've got a sick gaming PC, got a happy relationship, got like a dog. I like my life. Money, like I could inherit $1 million tomorrow. My life function just doesn't change. I have all the things I want. I like my life. So the only reason to go into psychiatry would be if I really wanted to prescribe medication. I'm happy not having that responsibility. Or if I wanted a lot more money. I don't need more money. What am I going to buy? A jet ski? I don't leave my house. What are my thoughts on Freud? I think Freud's pretty dope. He's a pretty wild man. He had some interesting ideas, you know, for sure, some interesting ideas. His idea about like the unconscious being a thing, revolutionary. His idea that you could help people by talking to them, revolutionary. As surprising as that is, revolutionary. We take that for granted now, but was not something to take for granted in the late 19th century. All right, we got a question from the Discord. One sec. Assuming the... All right, we're back onto the zombie question. Assuming the person is able to fight off the virus, realistically, could someone return to normal functioning, or would there most likely be lifelong consequences? They would probably be able to return to normal functioning. Like maybe they'd be traumatized from like the things that they did or that time period, but not everyone would be traumatized from it. I think a lot of people would be able to return back to normal. Think about like the insane hormone changes that people go through in like menopause or pregnancy or even puberty for some people. Crazy hormone shifts, crazy personality changes, crazy behaviors, crazy unpredictable in a lot of ways on how it's going to affect the person. But then the hormones kind of equalize and people just go back to normal after a few months. So you'd probably see that too. All right, question from the Discord. Why do I feel like my trauma isn't real? Like the more I try to remember, the more the memory fades. That may be actually an indication that the traumatic memory itself is healing. One thing that is very, very common when you're a therapist working with people through trauma is that the more that a person heals from their traumatic memory and processes it, the less clear and the less vivid that traumatic memory actually becomes, and it seems to fade. Maybe that's an indication that you're kind of engaging in self-exposure work to the trauma, and you're actually kind of healing it yourself, and that's pretty cool. Good job if that's the case. Or if that's not the case and you feel still turbo traumatized, maybe your brain is kind of like locking away more and more of that memory because it's like, hey, crazy person, why do you keep making us think about this? This sucks. I'm going to lock this away in a box. I don't like thinking about this. No, I'm looking at all the chats. So I'm looking at the TikTok, I'm looking at the YouTube and the Twitch chat. Jordanish, oi, how you doing? But like there's a lot of chat coming through. You know what? Screw this. I'm like 10 minutes behind on the chat. So if you ask a question in the last 10 minutes, I'm catching up. I'm going to the most recent. Again, if you guys feel like I've missed your question, join my Discord. The link's in my bio. There's a link tree there. Go join the Discord. Join the Psych discussion channel. I'll always answer all the Discord questions with priority. let's catch up. Let's see the more recent questions. How to cope with exams having ADHD, like in the exam itself. See if you can bring in like a drink, like a Gatorade or a Powerade, full sugar, not none of that no sugar nonsense garbage. Bring that in, slowly sip on it throughout the thing. You can even get like invisible ones that look like water, so you can sneak it in that way. For some people, having like that little top up of like glucose consistently throughout the exam can help them stay a little bit more focused. Is convincing yourself you are faking anxiety a healthy coping mechanism? No. I think anytime you're trying to convince yourself that like what you're experiencing isn't real, like you're genuinely trying to gaslight yourself, it's probably not a good coping experience. Is self-harm a serious problem? Not always, but in a lot of cases it can be. A lot of self-harm in and of itself, like when you see it moment to moment, genuinely isn't like that big of a deal. In that instance, if you could isolate it, the problem with self-harm is that it's never isolated. It spreads in two ways. The first, which people don't often think of, is that self-harm spreads contagiously, particularly around like the populations that are vulnerable to it, like teenagers. When you see like one teenager self-harming and their friends notice that, it kind of contagiously spreads, and so then you get the harm like multiplies out. That's one thing a lot of people don't think of. Then to the actual individual itself, self-harm tends to get worse over time. So it tends to like get more severe over time, or it tends to subsume. So a person might have like 10 different coping skills, coping mechanisms, things they do. And then gradually over time, self-harm kind of erodes those other ones and kind of becomes all encompassing. And it's like the only thing the person does. And then that's like, obviously the harm just stacks up more and more and more. But also depending on, oh my God, I just got the TikTok notification that this live stream has now been restricted. We said the naughty word, people. We said the naughty word. We said the naughty word of self-harm. Is that why people just type SH? So TikTok censors us if we don't say SH. Good Lord. Whatever. Anyway, so instances of self-harm in and of themselves typically are not that harmful, but like you never know. You could slip and hit an artery. Your blade could be a little bit dirty. You get a bacterial infection. Something goes gangrenous, right? Like you don't know. The odds of it happening on any one occasion, not that high. But like if people are engaging this long term over time, the risks of not so great things happening stack. What are the more obvious signs of ADHD? The diagnostic criteria for ADHD actually has just like really obvious signs. Let's talk about it. So the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, let's just read through them. So often fidgeting, talking excessively, not being able to like, often interrupting other people, really struggling emotionally to like self-restraint to wait for your turn when you're waiting in line, when you're waiting in traffic, often losing important things, losing your car keys, losing your USBs, losing important projects, losing pieces of paper that you need to bring home to your parents from school, feeling really easily distracted by irrelevant thoughts or irrelevant stimuli that aren't necessarily just because of anxiety. And just general forgetfulness. These things are pretty obvious to a lot of people, and they're actually diagnostic. All right, we got some Twitch questions. What are my thoughts on sertraline? Wait, am I offline on Twitch? Am I off? No, I should be online on Twitch. Okay, what are my thoughts on sertraline? Sertraline, also known as squirtraline, because it gives you diarrhea. How detailed should I go on these things? So sertraline is used to treat, generally speaking, anxiety, depressive disorders, sometimes like OCD. Sometimes they give it to people with like other things, but like generally it's like an antidepressant. It's an SSRI, but not all SSRIs work the same. It seems to be like fine. It's generally prescribed quite frequently because it's well tolerated. Like outside of the squirtraline side effects, it tends to not have like a ton of like really bad side effects. That's why it's given out a lot. It works just about as good as like any other like frontline SSRI for the things it's prescribed for. I think that the what's the word? The coddling or the censorship on like TikTok, YouTube, like these places where you can't say words like suicide, you can't say words like self-harm, you can't say words like died. like people have to use like unalive, like they died. Like it's kind of ridiculous, right? You think about like what people are just exposed to through the nature of living. Do you really think that like these words are going to like devastate the minds of your users? Like I just don't understand why they're restrictive, like so restrictive in this way. And it's obviously dumb because now in future streams, like there's no point in me restricting myself now. The stream's already restricted. So I'm not going to censor myself now. But like obviously in the future, I'm just going to say SH instead of self-harm because now I know. You know what I mean? Actually, I say that, but that's probably not true. I know that saying like suicide is a bad word on TikTok, and I just say it anyway. So other people though, other people. No one cares about this stream. There's only like 50 people watching at the moment, so like it's not that many people. But like everyone else just bypasses it. People just say unalive. You know what I mean? People just say SH. Like it's whatever. I'm not going to get too fired up over a bloody TikTok policy. I guess I'm asked this all the time. Is there a Canadian accent or just me? Yeah, look, guys, can we get put a number 1 in the chat if you think my accent is Canadian, number 2 if you think it's American, number 3 if you think it's Australian, number 4 if you think it's British. Let's see where we landed. How do I know if I have bipolar, BPD, or neither? If you have a lot of severely dysfunctional, volatile endings to relationships because you're afraid of abandonment or perceptions of rejection, and you engage in self-destructive, self-harming behaviors out of a desire to harm yourself, that's indicative of BPD. If your self-harming or destructive behaviors are coming out of not a deliberate attempt to harm yourself, but because like you're really, really manic, you feel and you're really, really irresponsible, right? That's more of a mania associated with bipolar. But if you're self-harming from like depression, that's more of that could be bipolar too. I dislike it because it might prevent people from expressing how they're feeling. Yeah. Which number was Australian? So number 1 for Canadian, 2 is USA, 3 is Australia, 4 is British. I don't think I sound British anymore. Bro, I came across like this video of that I made for when I was playing RuneScape, and I think I was like 14 at the time. My accent was like full proper British. And I think it was because at the time, a lot of the majority of RuneScape content creators were British, and I would just watch their videos, and I probably listened to them more than I listened to my friends. And so like my accent just like, whenever I made RuneScape content, my accent just went into like absolute Britain mode. It's like Canadian American, Canadian British. I'm getting a lot of Australian British mix. Okay. Apparently I still sound British. Neat. Australian who is a world traveler. And that's it. I can just tell people, yeah, look, Mr. Worldwide. You have the same accent, you're Australian, however you've traveled. People with autism have an American accent because of TV and stuff. This is actually true. A lot of the children who I've worked with who are on the autism spectrum have like right proper American accents. Like, yeah, it's really funny because they just like watch a lot of American TV shows and they just like integrate that and like they're really Americanized. It's actually it's kind of cute. It's like, okay. Like a little kid comes in and the parent greets you and the parent's like, hey, g'day, how's it going? Nice to meet you. Oh, this is my kid, you know, little Johnny. And I'm like, hey, hi Johnny, how you doing? He's like, hi, it's nice to meet you. It's like, what? Yeah, it's kind of funny. How do I feel about tall poppy syndrome in Australia? So for those of you who are not Australian, tall poppy syndrome is what we call, there's a kind of a cultural phenomena in Australia where poppies are a type of flower, right? And they grow and people like to like pick them and whatever. And if you have a lot of poppies, they kind of look nice when they're all the same height. And if one grows like too tall, the farmer or whatever who will like just cut it off, right? So that it doesn't like interrupt like the nice visual flow of the poppy field. Tall poppy syndrome basically is like when someone excels too much and gets too far beyond the crowd, the Australian public will kind of like cut that person down to like even things out. We don't like people being too far above the poppy field. Is it actually real? I don't really know. I don't know if like it's a cultural stereotype that Australians know about other Australians. And like you definitely encounter it, but I don't know if it's like unique to Australia. I think a lot of cultures do this. All right. Another question from the Discord. Again, if you guys want to ask questions in the Discord, the link's in my bio in the link tree. I'm directly related to someone who did something awful. Now it bugs me knowing I share blood with that person. Any way to move past it? No contact with that person, and what happened doesn't relate to you at all. So it bugs you because you're related to that person? Is it because the implication is that because you share their genetics, that you are then have the same proclivity to engage in whatever bad thing that they did? It would kind of depend on like why it bothers you that you share blood with them. Is it because you feel like responsible because they're part of your family? Like that would kind of depend. The right proper thing I got out of when Game of Thrones was still really big. The Game of Thrones subreddit had this user who after each episode they would post like a recap of the episode, but they do it in like an abridged format with like kind of comedy, and it'd just be like a slideshow of images. And there was this one episode where Jon was meeting Daenerys and he had the onion smuggler dude next to him. And yeah, they're like, oh, this is Daenerys, queen of the blah, and then is it Davos? So Davos was like, this is Jon Snow. He's a right proper lad. Right proper. That was just, that it's seared into my brain. That one abridged just image from Reddit from like 2018 or whatever. It just seared into my memory. So now right proper is just a part of my lexicon. No, I am happily married. No, it'd be rather difficult for me to live with my parents. Is Adderall worth the long-term risks on cardiovascular health? It helps me so much with day-to-day. Yeah, generally speaking, stimulant medications for ADHD, if you look longitudinally, you look at the data long-term from stimulant medication for ADHD, the benefits far outweigh the negatives in terms of life expectancy. So people who are medicated with ADHD have a much higher life expectancy. It doesn't actually look like that. Their life expectancy just, it doesn't, yeah. With ADHD, like the average life expectancy, right, is, I don't know how I'd graph this. But anyway, people with ADHD who are medicated live longer. Yes, there's cardiovascular risks to some of the medications, but you die less of other things. You die less of like accidental road accidents. You die less of accidental overdoses. You die less because of like shitty food impulsive choices, shitty alcohol, shitty substance impulsive choices. Like all those things diminish with medication. And so because of that, like the trade-off is very much worth it. What are we talking about right now? Game of Thrones, apparently. ADHD person here, you get very deep lows after your stimulants finish their half-life. Is that normal? Probably, right? When you think about like what they're doing, they're juicing up your, depending on the stimulant, but a lot of them, they're juicing up your dopamine, they're juicing up your norepinephrine. So you're going to feel like more motivated, you're going to feel more focused and all of those things. You're going to feel more energized. Then as those effects diminish, you're kind of returning to how things were before. And it's like, oh, you get to compare and contrast like how things are on medicated to how they're not. I don't think a lot of people experience like a massive crash, but like definitely some kind of a come down is very, very common. Why do I feel so empty even though I have everything to be happy? Maybe what your brain really wants is something that you don't currently feel like you have, or maybe the way that you're behaving in the world is a way that your brain is unsatisfied with and it wants you to act more in line with your values. Yes, TikTok, I am in fact still present. I am not an AI. All right, back to we got the question from Discord. So the person feels bad because someone they are related to did something bad, and this person feels embarrassed. They don't feel responsible, but knowing that you're related to them is an embarrassment. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So it comes down to a perception of judgment, right? People will perceive the person who did something bad as bad, naturally. And then it sounds like you're fearful that other people will judge you because it's like, oh, and you're related to them, so therefore you also must be kind of like a dirty or a bad person. Is that what's going on? Because if that's what's going on, and now that we have that information out in the open, the resolve to that, I'm assuming you can come to that yourself. If I'm from Australia, is Opera okay with TikTok appearances? Beats me. I think as long as I'm not getting out of line. Like, I don't say any, like, I hedge everything where I'm tentative. I just say things that I'm confident in terms of, like, the research backing of it. I think the main thing is, right, like, you don't want to paint the profession in a negative light. So, you know, like, I'm not going to start railing lines of coke on the live stream. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you're not dumb about it, I think it's generally, Opera's going to be fine. Personal question. Thoughts on sociopathy symptoms related to trauma-based emotional disconnect? So sociopathy and psychopathy are not really like clinical terms that we use very much. We might talk about like antisocial personality disorder for people who are like callous, lacking effective empathy, who are law breakers, rule breakers, and like kind of like cruel and mean to other people. But we don't really talk about sociopathy as such because it's the way that people use the word kind of changes sentence to sentence. So it's not a very good term. But when people do go through significant trauma, obviously one way to react to that is to suppress your emotive and empathetic functionality, and to kind of take the role of like survival of myself takes priority overall. And also if you've been kind of pushed down a lot, then if you go survival overall and I get to finally put other people underneath me on the totem pole, gets back to that earlier conversation we had about oppressed becoming the oppressors, how that's not always the case, but some people react like that. But yeah, if you combine like a shutdown of emotionality, a shutdown of empathy with a desire to place yourself higher on the totem pole because you hated how it felt on the bottom, you could definitely see those tendencies emerging. You could probably undo those tendencies to a degree by helping people find ways to perceive themselves at the height of certain hierarchies that don't involve the domination or the hurting of other humans, as well as like a processing of the trauma, a recognizing of safety, a reconnection with their emotional experiences, and so forth. Your 5-year-old daughter is going to her first psych session this week for anxiety, including an extreme fear of dogs. Any advice to ensure she gets the most out of it, or things you can do to help her at home? Generally speaking, like your psychologist would walk you through like what they want from you in the first session. Like for example, when I work with young kids in the first session, I always have like parents bring the kid in and we all kind of like have a conversation together. We all play a game together. We all do some activities together to kind of build a level of comfort in the room. If she has like an extreme fear of dogs, then doing like a really slow graded exposure to dog related stimuli was probably going to be what takes place. Should be fine for you to be in the room for those things if it helps your daughter, but to a degree it might be better for your daughter to learn that she can handle it even if her parents aren't around. So maybe sometimes you want to step out while they're doing that exposure work as well. But generally speaking, like your psychologist should walk you through with like what you should get out of it. Just make sure that she's had like a good breakfast, she's had a good sleep, you've prepped her that like, hey, we're going to meet somebody, we're going to do some talking, we might do some activities, we might do some games. This person helps people who are really, really afraid to feel less afraid over time. Like you can give it like in very basic language like that so she understands what to expect. In the Netherlands, there's an uptick of confused people on the streets. Is it the same in Australia? This reminds me of, was it Bill Burr? Some comedian. Some comedian had a bit and he's like, look, homeless people these days are very different to homeless people when I was a kid. Back in the day, you know, you just see a homeless person and it was just like a dude. There was one dude in the town. He was homeless Greg. These days you go out and like there's people just like yelling at the trees and screaming at the air, right? And everyone just walks past them like it's normal. Like this is a normal thing. Back in the day, you know, they would be out there for 20 minutes and the van would roll up and be like, hey, it's time to go. I think that was a Bill Burr bit. I don't know if there's an uptick of confused people on the streets or mentally ill people on the streets. Maybe there is. Maybe it's because they all used to be hoarded off somewhere else and now they're not. What would cause common memory gaps? Your partner tends to forget things that happen same day at times. Drinking. Excess drinking can do that. I mean, lots of things can do that. I'm just going to say excess drinking. You want the cause? That's it. That's the only thing. The only thing that it can be. Excess alcohol consumption. As well as like potentially 30 other things. Psychiatrist recently commented that undiagnosed autism and ADHD can lead to other mental health disorders such as BPD. Thoughts? Yes, so if you have a problem, right? You have a problem and you are trying to treat the problem, but you don't know what causes the problem. Like, for example, what's a really good example of this? Yeah, here's a good example. Okay. You have a house. You wake up in the morning and you find a giant puddle of water on the floor and you're like, oh no, I forgot my arms. All right, now I have my arms. Let's get the mop and let's clean up this water. Okay, great. You've treated the problem. The water is gone. Congratulations. Amazing. You go to sleep. You wake up the next day, another big puddle of water. Oh no, let's get the mop. Let's clean it up again. Third day happens, same thing, puddle of water, clean it up. Okay, what happens over time? You haven't treated the problem. The source of the problem is you have a hole in your roof and it's leaking water down onto the floor, right? And now because you keep just band-aiding, you keep applying a band-aid solution and wiping up the puddle instead of fixing the hole, now you've got like corrosive water damage to your floorboards and now like your house is structurally unfit to live in. Similar things can happen with mental health, right? When we consider things like autism, things like ADHD, right? These often are getting diagnosed later into life. So people are living their whole lives with a lot of challenges that aren't being assisted or helped or treated. And then because of that, like you're essentially getting these secondary damages that could have been avoided if you just like help these people earlier in life to accurately identify what's going on for them. So yeah, if you're not treating the cause of the problem accurately, it can definitely lead to secondary disorders and secondary problems that could have otherwise been wholly avoidable. Yeah, look, Alzheimer's dementia or whatever could be early onset Alzheimer's dementia, but it's like that could be one of 30 things. Like when we think about what causes memory gaps, right? Alcohol, substance use, early onset Alzheimer's dementia, just generic ADHD, CTE, having too many concussions, getting dropped on your head as a kid, being really depressed, being in dissociative states from trauma, just having a bad memory, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough food intake, being on a like caloric restriction, like all of these things can cause gaps in memory that are like unpredictable to a degree. All right, another question from the Discord. Again, if you guys want your questions answered with priority, join the Discord. The link to it is in my link tree, which is in my bio. What do I think about diagnostic overshadowing? Say someone goes to a doctor with a physical condition, and the doctor notices that the patient has a history of anxiety, so they put it down to anxiety instead of exploring what could be causing physical symptoms. Do you see it often? Yes. And you see it both ways. But yeah, diagnostic overshadowing, where people have like one pre-existing condition and people are just like, well, yeah. I see this all the time actually with ADHD. I see it a lot with ADHD, or actually with autism too, because part of my job as a psychologist is people will come to me and be like, hey, can you please evaluate me to see like if I am on the autism spectrum, to see if I have ADHD. And it's not uncommon for people to come to me and be like, look, I went to get an assessment, a couple of years ago, but the person said, well, because I had anxiety or because I had depression or because I had, X, Y, Z, they couldn't determine if what was going on for me was ADHD or depression. So they just said, I don't know. That's actually really, really common. Like they'll just put it down to some pre-existing thing instead of being like, well, maybe it's this or maybe this actually came first and then caused what was previously identified. So this is actually like pretty common. I wouldn't say like turbo common, but like common enough to where it's problematic for sure. Good question, Lucy. All right, another question from the Discord. I have a fear of spiders. Here's the thing. I used to love spiders, then I became afraid of them. Didn't like them again, and now you're back to fearing them. You haven't had any problems with them. I'm just wondering what are some possibilities as to why my fear came and went. I used to be able to hold them, but now even 5 feet away, I get very nervous or scared. There's an actual psychological term for this, which is slipping my mind, but you can take one stimulus. So for example, a spider, right? You can take a spider and say you're not afraid of the spider, but then you pair it with another stimulus that elicits a fear response. So maybe, I don't know, like you're watching a scary movie or something, and then you see a spider at the same time. Because you've got a fear response from the scary movie, and then you see the spider at the same time, your brain then associates the spider with the fear, even though the fear came from the scary movie. Or, for example, you see a spider, and then someone else is there, and they're like freaking out, and then you see them freaking out, so then your brain goes, oh, I guess we also have to freak out. So you can kind of like learn to be afraid of things through these different methods, even if the original thing didn't actually cause any harm to you. Maybe things like that are going on. Maybe it's just the type of spider. Who knows? Kind of drunk, but I've been noticing I'm a bit of a schizoid. What would you say causes this? The cause of schizoid, I'm not sure of, but we can talk about a few interesting things related to the whole, what would you call it? The whole schism, the whole, like the schizoid, the schizophrenic, the schizotypal, the whole schiz family. We can talk about a few things related to this that I think are actually quite interesting. One is the difference between, am I typing? Yeah, I'm typing. Okay, one is the difference between vertical and lateral thinking styles, and one is the difference between intuitive and deliberative thinking styles. And let's tie this in with talking about autism, because this all ties together funnily enough. So vertical thinking is where you take one topic, like, I don't know, ocean facts about the blue whale, and then you go like 100 levels deep and you know like everything about the blue whale. You know what I mean? So vertical thinking is you take one topic and you go like balls deep. It's amazing. Lateral thinking is you take a topic and you get a little bit surface and then you like jump, and then you jump to another topic, and then you jump, right? And then you jump over here, and then you jump over there, right? This is extreme lateral thinking. So it's topic to topic to topic to topic to topic, and you're like drawing these links between them, and you're seeing how they're all the dots are connected. So that's vertical versus lateral thinking. Intuitive thinking is where you you don't really think through things very much. You just make decisions and you make assumptions based on like the feel, the vibe, and it's just like very quick, very rapid. Deliberative thinking is where you like pause and you really analyze and you logic your way through and you really deliberate over like a situation. So when we consider the whole schizoid, schizophrenic, schizotypal family and autism, these actually fall on kind of dual spectrums, where on one end you have autism that is very high in deliberation and very low in intuition, and schizophrenic, schizotypal, which is very high in intuition and very low in deliberation, and autism, which is very high in vertical thinking, and the schiz family, which is very high in lateral thinking. So they're kind of like opposite ends of like both of these spectrums. For most people in the general population, most people actually just fall like squarely in the middle. Most people can use both vertical and lateral thinking. Most people can be both intuitive and deliberative. And a lot of people with autism can use both as well. Obviously, we're just speaking in generalities here. But yeah, when you consider the extremes of both spectrums, it's this family up here and this family down here. There's some decently defendable points that when you look at some of the real big breakthroughs and things like that happen in terms of thought, perception, it comes from people who are much more lateral thinkers, who are able to make these big leaps in logic and connection that like normal people wouldn't be able to see. The thing is a lot of these leaps, I don't know how much of it is replicable. I think like if you have a person in a room like throwing darts blindly, eventually they're going to hit something. And I think that's actually what happens with a lot of these really distal, like when you're not going from point A to point B, you're going from like point A to point like zeta and you're coming back around, like, you know what I mean? I think people will sometimes stumble upon truths or ways of thinking that are revolutionary and amazing that no one else who is not highly laterally thinking could have ever stumbled upon. And I think like those things could be really, really cool. Abstract thought is the start of human consciousness. Define consciousness. Is it a disorder if you can't feel emotions? No, but what that is called is alexithymia. So alexithymia is a state of being where you're essentially colorblind to emotions. You either can't feel them or you can't, like, you struggle with like labeling them, verbalizing them, explaining them. That's alexithymia. And it's associated with a lot of negative life outcomes. It's associated with a lot of mental health disorders. And it's really, really common with like a lot of mental health disorders, and particularly it seems like it's becoming more common. Is there a fresh new wall of schizo posting on Discord? If yes, I'll consider it. Not this time. Not this time. That guy who like full on like went wild in my Discord ended up like sending me emails and shit too. It was interesting. How is intuition measured? There's two ways that I'm aware of that we typically measure intuition versus deliberation in terms of decision making. So the first is like through like a questionnaire. So you literally just ask people like about their preferences. You're like, hey, do you prefer to be like more intuitive or deliberative? Do you tend to act quicker, or do you tend to deliberate and take a long time to analyze things, right? Like you ask about different contexts, like what do people prefer to do and what do they tend to do? The other thing you can do to kind of measure this is through like a specific task. So there's a task called the cognitive reflection task. Is it reflection or reflective? Whatever. Cognitive reflection task. And what this is you have questions that are designed to elicit an intuitive response that would be wrong. And so when people give you the wrong answer, you know they answered intuitively. And there's a deliberative response that would be correct. So when people give you the correct response, you know they answered correctly. Let me give you guys one of these questions. Answer it in the way that you would normally answer it. So if you normally would like answer it quickly, just answer it quickly. Don't like deliberately force yourself to like overthink it. Okay, are you ready? Put your answers in the chat and we'll see who's right. We'll see if you're an intuitive or deliberative thinker. A bat and a ball cost $1. The ball costs $1 more than the bat. How much does the bat cost? And I'll give you guys about 10 seconds to put your answers in the chat, and we'll see if you're a deliberative or an intuitive thinker. Wait, hang on. Did I word the question wrong? This is like off the top of my head. Hang on. Let me do the question again. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? They're $1.10 in total. The bat is $1 more than the ball. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, okay. We've got the answers flooding in. A lot of 10 cents, a couple of 5 cents. Okay. So for everybody who just answered that, if you answered 10 cents, you are wrong. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. Wait, how? Did I word this wrong again? Bloody hell, I'm going off of my memory here, and it's like late at night. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. Yeah. It's 5 cents. It's 5 cents. The ball costs 5 cents. Ergo, the bat costs $1.05. Add $1.05 plus 5, you get $1.10. So it's 5 cents. But like based on intuition, you just go, oh, it's $1 more, and it's $1.10 total. So I guess it's 10 cents because 1 plus 10 is $1.10, right? So if you answered 5 cents, that requires more deliberative thinking. You are more of a deliberative thinker. If you answered 10 cents, you're more of an intuitive thinker. You answer things more intuitively. Tell us about recursive synchronicity and transient identity alteration in childhood. How can I tell you about something when I don't know what the words mean? How do I want to stop dollars per hour? Wait, is this another like self-harm trick? You don't have to worry, Sierra. This stream is already restricted. I've talked about suicide and self-harm too much, so no need for the spooky TikTok terms that I'm not going to understand with my boomer mind. Generally speaking, when it comes to like any type of maladaptive coping, so whether we're talking self-harm, whether we're talking alcohol, drugs, whether we're talking about like venting your rage out on your dog with your fists, whatever it is, right? You think about you're out there on the ocean, and in order to not drown, you are on a boat, but your boat kind of sucks. It's actually just a log, and you are surfing the entire time, and you have to pray to God that the water keeps moving or you're falling off that log. If I just came along and I'm like, hey, bro, your boat sucks. Stop doing that. Congratulations, you have unlocked drowning. So before you take away someone's boat, you have to make sure that you have another boat that you can give them, and hopefully that boat that you can give them is a little bit better. So if you ever want to like stop self-harming or maladaptive coping behaviors, you have to formulate some other types of like coping mechanisms that are attractive to you, that are doable for you, and then you have to like get used to using them. So figure out like some other self-soothing / coping mechanisms. Practice. And here's a tip. If you are taking a new boat out for a ride and you've never like taken this boat out before, do you want to go and like practice driving this boat on like the sickest, meanest storm of the century? Or do you want to like practice on like some pretty chill waters first? You want to practice on some pretty chill waters first, right? So when you're testing out like new coping strategies, test them and practice them and build them into a habit on calm seas first, and then on choppy water. And then hopefully when a storm comes, you'll have a chance. All right, another question from the Discord. Do I think we put too much weight behind mental health diagnoses in the modern day? Do you think awareness of mental health conditions is affecting the average human's cognitive bias, and they start looking for symptoms to relate to? I do believe there are those with mental health conditions that need treatment, but I think it's interesting the increase in diagnoses and awareness. There's like this little phenomena that happens with everyone when they study psychology, and you start doing the abnormal psych unit and you start learning about like all the psychological disorders, where everyone's like reading through the DSM and they're like, this is me. Or like, you know, people go on WebMD and they're like, I have a headache, and then they come out 10 minutes later and they're like, I think I have this abnormal tumor in the occipital lobe of my brain based on like what I was reading online. You know, right? Like people will start to feel like these things really apply to them. But generally speaking, people don't like, they just get over that. You know what I mean? Like people leave the abnormal psych class and they're like, okay, I don't think I'm actually have this thing, or I don't think I actually have this brain tumor, right? I don't think that awareness of mental health conditions is like making people worse. I think it's just kind of revealing the deteriorating state of the human condition and the human mental health. Yeah, I just don't think that learning about major depressive disorder is going to make people more depressed. It might just help them put words to an experience that they otherwise would have just kept quiet about. All right, another Discord question. I'm non-binary. My question is, if it's known what causes these feelings of non-binary on the mental side? Nope. And it's more of a, I'm gonna like pass the buck here and just be like, it's more of a philosophical question and a linguistic question, honestly, rather than, I mean, it's all psychological in the end, right? But my wheelhouse specifically is mental health and mental illness. That's like where that just makes it sound like I'm just super like turbo mentally ill, whatever. My wheelhouse is like mental health, mental illness, and mental health disorders. That's like more of my specialty. And I think like when we're talking about questions of like personality structure, the way that we self-reference and things like that, like I honestly think it's more of the field of philosophy. And the more that we try to, I don't know, like granularly psychoanalyze these things, probably we lose more meaning than we gain. All right, another Discord question. If a person has struggled with self-harm since their teenage years, do you believe they can stop? Or will they most likely need professional help? If you have fallen into a pattern of maladaptive coping that's been functional, but it's been maladaptive for a really long time, it can be really hard to disengage yourself from that by yourself. Particularly because like once you kind of entrench ways of coping with disaster, your brain really doesn't want you to change that, because it's like, well, this isn't great what we do, but like it keeps us alive, and it's going to resist you very strongly when you try to change that. And that's going to include putting up like mental barriers and inducing blind spots and all kinds of things to prevent you from changing this. So doing that change by yourself might be really difficult. Could you do it by yourself? Sure. I'm sure plenty of people do it by themselves, but like probably get professional help. Yeah, I'm taking questions from TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube chat. Obviously, they all kind of scroll by kind of fast. At the moment, there's only like 35 people watching, so it's a bit more manageable. But when the chat goes a bit faster, if you guys want your questions answered with priority, drop them in the Discord. Tell us what happened when Nietzsche lost his mind. Well, I was planning on reading this at some point. I've got Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. I've been planning to read it for a while. I finally got my hands on a physical copy of it, hoping that like, if I get the physical copy of it, maybe I'll actually read it instead of just like trying to stare at a PDF. But honestly, I don't know that much about Nietzsche. I know that his sister got like super into the Nazi thing and was trying to like twist and bend his works to fit like the Übermensch ideal of the Nazi party. But I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have really been big into those things. But again, I don't really know that much about him. Can you please bluntly sum up what psychology is about? The study of the human mind, why we do and think and feel the things that we do, feel, and think. Is studying psychology difficult? From a student going to their first year of psych, no. If you're good enough to, like, no. I think if you're interested in it, no. I don't think it's that hard. All right, questions from the Discord. What type of thinking is associated with obsession with words? Like, I love saying words together that rhyme, that have certain feelings together, puns, etc. Whenever someone asks me a question, I don't immediately think how to answer the question. I think of their wording and how their questions sound, sometimes just responding with a pun to their question. I would both love and hate having a conversation with you. Or imagine like your father is dead. You're just firing back puns. I don't know. What causes that though? Jesus. There's no association with any mental health disorder. So that's not explainable by like any mental health disorder. Maybe if you really twist the symptom of stereotyped speech, you could fit it roughly into the box of autism in a really strange way. I don't really think that's associated with autism either, strictly by itself. If we talk about like the thinking styles that we were mentioning earlier, like the lateral versus vertical thinking styles, maybe that's more of like an interesting combination of like lateral thinking when it comes to like linguistic usage with vertical thinking in terms of like your dedication to puns. I don't know. Is there a reason for irrational fears? It's currently a huge thunderstorm and it's been going on for ages and I can't lie, quite scared. Just curious if there's a reason why I'm afraid of thunderstorms with no prior trauma related to them. Kind of comes back to like that spider question we answered earlier. Perhaps when you experience the thunderstorm, you experience some other type of fear-inducing stimuli, and then your brain just associated thunderstorms with fear, or perhaps you saw how other people reacted to it, or perhaps it's the sound of the thunder itself that associates, like you associate loudness with some other type of trauma. It's kind of activating that. Maybe it's just the sense that it's an overwhelming situation for you that puts you into a fear response. You kind of have to tunnel down in terms of you individually, what's going on. And the way you do that is through thought analysis, right? So thought catching. Turn your focus inward and ask yourself the question, what are the thoughts? What are the words that my brain is projecting to me that is causing this fear response? Right? Because if we think about, we have our emotions. So for you, you're talking about fear. Emotions don't just come out of nowhere. They don't just spontaneously manifest. From our unconscious mind, from our subconscious mind, whatever you want to call it, right? From the unconscious mind, we have our perceptions, which if we really focus on them with thought catching, they come out as thoughts. Right? We have our perceptions and our judgments. So if you really focus down on it, you can be like, what's happening here? And then maybe the thoughts that are going through your mind is like, I'm in danger, or maybe it's activating a memory or whatever it is, right? But through thought catching, through turning your focus internally to figure out like what's causing the emotion of fear. So not just like, I feel fear, but like what's causing the emotion of fear. Drag whatever's happening in your unconscious mind, make it conscious, and then you can work with it. Is there a way to solve it? Yes. So once you understand what it is that's causing the fear reaction, and that's not the thunderstorm. The thunderstorm is like the situation, but it's not what's causing the fear reaction, right? If you have fear, that's going to be caused by either it's going to be some kind of perceptions, like some sort of thought judgments around the thunderstorm that might be irrational. So like, I'm going to get struck by lightning, I'm going to die. So it could be a thought. It could be a memory, right? The sound of it could activate another trauma. It could be like some of these things. If it's like a memory, if it's another trauma, then you would address that, and then the thunderstorm would no longer create a fear response. If it's a thought response, like a judgment, like I'm going to get struck by lightning, I'm going to die, you could challenge that with like cognitive restructuring, experimentation, like basic CBT things would work really, really well for that. So you figure out what's causing the fear response, and that's not the situation. It's the thing that's above the fear response, and then you can work with that and deal with it. We can't deny Zimbardo's contribution to psych. Do I think he was good / ethical in his... Zimbardo, why do I know this name? What experiment did he do? It was the prison guard experiment. Wait, no, was it the shocking experiment? Was it the prison guard experiment or the one where it's like, give electrical shocks to this person? I think it was the prison guard experiment, right? Yeah. I think it's probably fine. I don't think, from memory, none of the experiments he did really left like any long-term lasting harms. And I guess it got people interested in psychology, so fuck it. Why not? How is stress related to ADHD? It's mostly a one-way street. So ADHD tends to make things in life harder. That's just what it does. And when things in life become harder, you become more stressed about doing those things. Obviously, as your overall like generic stress levels in life get higher, your ADHD symptoms can actually become worse, primarily because higher levels of stress impact your sleep, which makes you sleep just more poorly. Poor sleep is correlated with ADHD symptoms, so that's kind of how that can impact. But like ADHD makes things harder. When things are harder, you become more stressed about doing them. And then in a very small way, the stress feeds back and makes this ADHD worse. But it's ADHD at the root, right? It's ADHD at the core. The storm could cause fear-like symptoms because of subsonic frequencies and maybe changes in positive or negative ions. If you had trauma and then having bad dreams of someone holding you down, what does that mean? Maybe that's part of your trauma. Maybe it's reliving it. Maybe it's just the fear of being out of control, the perception of being like out of control and being violated or being hurt, and then this is leaking in through your nightmares. What's this thought-catching theory part of? It's basically like any psychotherapy would use it. Psychodynamic would use it. CBT would use it. ACT would use it. Thought catching is just the meditation does it. It's just the act of turning your attention inward and trying to figure out like can we put words to the processes of our unconscious mind that are explaining why we're feeling and acting what we do in the present. One of my thoughts on getting diagnosed with ADHD, depression, and PTSD at 20, that it's probably a fairly common age where people start to really notice shit's going whack because they're out of high school, maybe they're out of home, and things are really starting to get a bit wacky and out of control. What does X mean? There was a game I think called LA Noire. I think it came out in like 2012, and there's a meme that came out of that where someone said something to you and they were just like lying, and you could press X on your controller and it said like press X to doubt. So you'd press X and then you'd like doubt what they said. Best advice for severe anxiety and panic attack disorder. The best advice? Like I have to give just like one piece of advice? Oh, good Lord. Get professional help. Advice number 2 would be fix your sleep. Advice number 3 would be fix your exercise routine. Xanax. Get on the little Xan. Get on the little Xan bandwagon. Let's go. Pop a few Xannies. Hey, yo. Pop the trunk, open up. I sold my soul a good price out of sight. My whole got telling her right. Whole squad run through the shit, yike. Say I'm a businessman, then I've been a Do I have any little Xan fans in here? Any little Xan stans? Have I ever dealt with anyone with borderline personality disorder? Yeah. So like, I don't turn like I've worked with like a few clients with borderline personality disorder. It's not like one of the main demographics that I work with. I don't like advertise that I work with it, but if clients end up in my office with borderline personality disorder, like we rock and roll and we do it. Is fluoxetine a good option for severe anxiety? I should probably I'm not going to answer these questions. I should probably do like an actual overview video on like medications for anxiety. Because we've gone over on stream like medications for PTSD. We've gone over like medications for ADHD. We haven't really gone over medications for anxiety. I will say this though, that if you want a real shorthand, a lot of medications for anxiety, especially anxiolytics, not antidepressants like fluoxetine, But a lot of anxiety medications are specifically told, like you're told to take them short term. Don't turn them into like chronic use. Not good for chronic use. What do I think about schizoid personality disorder? That I've never had someone come into my office who has schizoid personality disorder because they just stay at home. Yeah, I'm just not the right person to ask. I have a fairly good knowledge for medications in terms of like ADHD because ADHD is one of the primary demographics I work with. So obviously I'm intimately familiar with that. And like everyone who has ADHD almost everyone is medicated. Whereas I would say like maybe the majority of people who have anxiety are not medicated. Certainly the majority aren't taking anything daily. And the ones who have medication, they're typically like, they have like very short term, like things like benzodiazepines, diazepam, things like that. And they're not really taking them very often because it's not good to take them very often. Some people will be on things like fluoxetine or other SSRIs, but I wouldn't say that's the majority. Key differences between autism and ADHD. Yes, if you want to really quickly differentiate autism and ADHD, the main thing you're looking at is two things. The main thing, though, is the social domain. So people with ADHD can struggle to maintain friendships, but it's because they kind of just annoy other people, right? Like through their impulsivity, hyperactivity, interrupting other people, people kind of get annoyed and drift away. Whereas with autism, it's more of like the autistic person either just doesn't want to approach and make friendships, or they don't know how to make them, or other people just view them as like very weird or awkward, and so they kind of like feel that conversation with the person is jarring, so then they don't make them that way. People with ADHD will forget to maintain friendships. They'll forget to respond to people. They'll forget to reach out to people. Whereas people with autism won't forget, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to effectively respond to messages. They don't know how to effectively plan outings and things like that, so they don't do it. So maintaining friendships falls apart for that way. The other domain that you don't really see are going to be things like restricted interests. So people with ADHD can get like really, really into things, but not in the same way that like people with autism do. With autism, especially in early childhood, you'll tend to see restricted interest in like very interesting things. The stereotype is like trains, right? Like people get like turbo into trains. Whereas with ADHD, what you tend to see is a little bit more jumping. Like they'll find one thing, they'll go super deep, but then they get bored of it. They find something, go super deep. They get bored of it. They find something, go super deep. Like the charge, the desire for novelty is like much higher than in autism. But the main thing you look at is the social domain, because they share a few things, right? They share the sensory domain that's shared between them. And they do struggle both with like maintaining friendships, but it's just for different reasons. Also, when it comes to understanding relationships, like the meta concepts of relationships, people with ADHD typically will get this. People with autism generally will struggle much more with that. How can we transcend enlightenment? Don't. The enlightenment was pretty great. Yeah, benzos are definitely not a long-term drug. Benzos are like one of the few prescribed medications in the mental health sphere where like chronic use coupled with sudden cessation can like be life-threatening. There's not many like that, and those are one of them. Thoughts on venlafaxine, if there are any known side effects for withdrawal. Is that the SNRI? Yeah, venlafaxine is the SNRI, sold under the brand name of Effexor. I don't think it's very common here in Australia. Like, I just haven't really encountered it. I don't know if like a single one of my clients is on venlafaxine, so I don't know that much about it. How do I deal with severe executive dysfunction with no possible access to ADHD diagnoses or resources? Okay, no possible access to any resources, because obviously the first would be like getting to see a psychiatrist, stimulants for executive functioning, show significant benefits, yada, 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 get medicated. In terms of like, if you're limiting yourself to self-help, if you're an adult, There's a book. If you have like a $10 budget, you can get this book. It's called Taking Charge of Adult ADHD. It's designed to be a self-help book. It's written by Russell Barkley. Is it dry? Yeah, it's dry. Is it effective though? Yeah, it is. So even if you take that book and you work through like one page of it a day, like your life will measurably improve. Your ability to function despite executive dysfunction will improve. So taking charge of adult ADHD might be a good place to start in terms of like getting a book and reading your way through that and putting it into practice. Briar, it's the SNRI and the withdrawals are horrible. You're on it currently. Right. The luminary is leaving the chat. Goodbye, Ghislaine Maxwell. By the way, if you guys want a shorthand for when you should disengage from people when they're speaking to you, if they use the word synchronicity, my brain just does it does an off switch. I actually don't know that much about SNRIs. If I brought up, I can't really show it on TikTok. This is the shame about TikTok. I can't show too much because it's the vertical. If I brought up my Discord document on my Obsidian document on medications, I don't have like a big section on SNRIs. Maybe we should do like an SNRI deep dive live stream. The only SNRI that I'm like mostly aware of is like methylphenidate. And that one seems to be pretty well tolerated by most people in terms of like when you stop taking it, there's no like real withdrawals. All right, got another Discord question. My mum is diagnosed with BPD. I want to get evaluated for autism ADHD. Will that influence the diagnosis of me if I tell your mum is BPD? But I don't want them to flag all my symptoms and put it down to BPD just because she does. So if they're doing a good job at like differential diagnoses and things like that, like it'd be good for them to have that information to take it into account. But BPD does differentiate away from autism and ADHD, and so as long as they ask the correct questions and they frame it into the correct Wait, methylphenidate is NDRI? What did I say? Wait, I said SNRI. Oh, Jesus. I need to sleep. I've been going on for like an hour more than I should be. Okay, methylphenidate, also known as Ritalin, is a norepinephrine dopamine enhancing drug, and it primarily works in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. It's prescribed to people with ADHD. SNRIs are serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. They work differently because they affect the serotonin system, not the dopamine system, as well as the norepinephrine system. There we go. Let's reinforce that knowledge in the brain. Thank you, Shader, in the Discord chat for helping me, pulling that one up on me. Appreciate you. I think there's if you can't explain a concept simply, probably means you don't have a very good understanding of it. And I use that kind of as a guideline metric for myself for when I need to understand a concept more. Like when you guys ask me questions, if I find myself having to use a lot of jargon or use a lot of terms that I know people won't get, it probably indicates to me that I don't understand a topic deep enough. Because I need to be able to explain it better. I do try my best to be able to explain things in a way where anyone listening anyone who doesn't have like profound intellectual disabilities or whatever, right? But anyone normie in the audience listening can understand it. But I generally try to use that as like a guideline of like, can I make this understandable to anyone? And then deep dive a level below that if I need to. Opinion on imaginal exposure therapy. Yeah, that's a cool topic. Let's talk about that. Is it okay to not have any empathy but be able to fake it super well? It's only a problem if it's creating problems. We'll keep getting back to that, but Yeah, let's talk about this. Imagine, how am I spelling this? Imagine, I don't like the word imaginal. It just sounds, I don't like it. Imagery, let's call it in vivo exposure therapy. So in vivo, what in vivo means is it's like internal in your head, in your imagination. In vivo exposure therapy. So one method of in vivo exposure therapy, let's use the spider example. So someone's really afraid of spiders. They're not a big fan. There's too many legs. They're too furry. They move too quickly. Fair enough. So one way that a person can get over their fear of spiders using in vivo exposure therapy would be the person like sits there, they close their eyes, and then they just like think about spiders a lot. They imagine spiders walking on them. They imagine handling spiders. They imagine all kinds of scenarios with spiders. And over time, if they started this and they're like, oh, spiders are like this much distressing, then after doing a bunch of like in vivo exposure therapy for a few hours a day, maybe it's like down here or down here, right? It works. In vivo exposure therapy works. There's no doubt about it. The research on it is just like abundantly clear. It works really, really well. What works even better is if you actually just like put them in a room with a spider. But normally you do in vivo work first, right? So you do the in vivo exposure therapy first, and then you put them in the room with the spider. Can I join to ask? Yes, if anyone wants to join for the voice chat, you can join my Discord. The link to my Discord's in my bio. There's a link tree there. Click the link tree, join my Discord, join the waiting room voice chat, and I'll drag you in when I have a free moment. If you guys are asking questions like this, so I'm not going to answer these specific ones. It's like, in what way is, Ritalin better than Adderall or bupropion better than 80, like whatever? The truth of the matter is that different human bodies react to different medications in different ways. Currently, there's no real way of figuring out what people are going to react to better before they actually take it. I know some places are selling services where they're like, look, we assess your genome and then we figure out what medications work best for you. As far as I'm aware, I just read a research paper on this a couple of days ago. These aren't super accurate in terms of like outcome benefits. So realistically, you're kind of just talking about like trial and error. Like you try it for a couple of weeks and it's like, but does it work? No, try something else. That's the biggest unfortunate reality of the current pharmacological like medication for psychology at the moment is it's just a lot of trial and error. Does that suck? Yes. Do we currently have a better system? No. Are people trying to develop better systems? Yes. Will there be better systems 20, 30 years from now? Probably. Yeah. Zana, I love you explain with words and story and visual too. Kudos. Thank you. You know who I'm copying? Pirate Software from YouTube. I saw him. Yeah. I saw him like doing live streams where he would just like draw while explaining things, and it would make it so much easier to engage. Because it made me, the reason why I wanted to figure out something that would get people to engage more is because I would do these live streams where I'd explain concepts. And to a point, I think this actually applies to my YouTube videos as well. I'm trying to include more motion graphics in my YouTube videos, but I feel like when I just talk for long periods of time through a screen, people kind of disengage. Whereas like in person, right? I'm talking with someone, working with someone one-on-one. I can draw on the whiteboard, or I can talk to them, or I can use like facial expressions more, and they're more in the moment, so they're more engaged. Whereas through a screen, virtually, people kind of disengage. Whereas if you just like draw things like while you're talking, people just like keeps the attention on more, right? They're more engaged in the concepts that you're actually talking about. I think I've just seen my favorite. This is the most Dante response ever from in my Discord chat. Someone asked, "What is a good sign I need ADHD meds or a higher dose?" And someone just responded, "You have ADHD and your meds aren't working." Yes, that is the good sign that you need meds or a higher dose. Is that you have ADHD and your meds aren't working. And obviously that's not what the person's asking, but I just love that answer. So that. can narcissism be inherited or is it environmental? It seems like for the majority of cases, it's primarily an influence of environment activating certain genetic predispositions. But for some people, it seems like they're just destined to enact a lot of narcissistic tendencies. All right. I'm about to wrap up the stream. If you guys want to catch the future ones, join my Discord. The link's in my bio, in my link tree there. I'll always be in the voice chat in my Discord, so you'll know when I go live. Also, when I post any new videos or whatever, they'll be in the Discord too. You can find them that way. And if you just want to join in for any psych discussions or talk about really anything related to what we're talking about, hop in the Discord. There's a psych discussion channel, or you can just hop in the general chat and talk shit. That's fine too. So, oh, you want to say goodbye to them too, Guzzlord? Okay. Gosh. Does he say bye-bye? Ah, not my face. That. Okay. Guzzy just told you to go join the Discord. That was his exact wording. He said it to me. All right, thanks for watching the stream. I'll see you in the next one. Gotcha. And we are... Bro, that is... Stop. My hand is not food. Ugh.